Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring the fascinating science and, the pharmacology of GLP-1 agonists today.
Yeah, these are the wildly popular new diabetes and weight loss drugs you're
Yep.
basically seeing everywhere in the cultural conversation right now.
Exactly. And we have compiled a massive stack of sources for you today. We're pulling from historical timelines, clinical trial data, and some pretty dense pharmacological research.
Really dense research.
Yeah, heavily dense. But our mission is to cut through the endless social media hype for you. We want to help you understand exactly how these drugs work, like how they actually lower glucose and appetite.
Right, and where they actually came from and why they are fundamentally reshaping modern medicine.
So before we get into the pharmaceutical engineering of it all, we have to start with a rather bizarre fact. While you've almost certainly heard the brand names of these drugs in the news, you probably don't know that the foundation of this multi-billion-dollar medical breakthrough actually traces back to the venomous saliva of a lizard.
I know it sounds completely absurd.
It's wild. Specifically, it's the Gila monster, which is native to the deserts of the American Southwest.
Yeah, it sounds like pure science fiction. But that origin story is arguably, one of those incredible chapters in modern pharmacology.
Right.
To understand why a lizard's venom is even relevant to human metabolism, we kind of have to look at the natural biological loop that these medications are hacking into.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So the whole story begins with a biological mystery that researchers observed back in the 1960s. They noticed something highly unusual about how the human body processes sugar.
Unusual how?
Well, they found that if you give a person a specific amount of glucose directly into a vein, like intravenously, their body releases a predictable, moderate amount of insulin to handle it.
Right, which makes sense.
Exactly. But if you give that person the exact same amount of glucose by mouth, letting them just drink it and process it through the stomach, their body releases significantly more insulin.
Wait, really? Just from drinking it versus an IV?
Yes, a massive difference in the insulin response.
So that implies the gut is sending some kind of like a preemptive signal to the pancreas. It's almost as if the digestive tract detects the sugar and starts, I don't know, shouting ahead to the rest of the body to prepare the necessary hormones before the sugar even hits the bloodstream.
That's exactly it. And the scientific community called that the incretin effect. For decades, researchers knew this early warning system existed, right? But they couldn't find the specific chemical messenger responsible for carrying that signal.
It's like knowing a phone is ringing but not knowing where it is.
Yeah, and it kicked off this massive, highly competitive hunt to isolate this elusive gut hormone. And that hunt dragged all the way into the 1980s.
Which brings us to a researcher named Graham Bell. So in 1983, Bell clones the glucagon gene, which is basically a biological blueprint, and he notices a fragment within it that looks vaguely similar to another hormone.
Right.
And the field eventually named this glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1 for short. But having the genetic blueprint isn't the same as holding the actual working biological machine, is it?
Not at all. Having a sequence of DNA merely tells you the potential proteins a cell could make. It doesn't tell you which specific snippet is biologically active in the human body.
Got it.
So finding that active fragment required years of painstaking peptide chemistry. And a researcher named Svetlana Mosov at Rockefeller University did the crucial foundational work here.
Right, the sources highlight her heavily.
Yeah, she identified and synthesized the exact active fragment of this hormone, which we now formally call GLP-1 737.
And her synthesized peptide is what allowed other scientists like Jens Juul Holst and Daniel Drucker in the late 80s to finally prove that this specific molecule powerfully stimulates insulin release in humans. Like, they finally found the messenger.
He found it. The mystery was solved.
It is worth noting, though, as our sources point out, that for years after this monumental discovery, Svetlana Mosov's specific contributions were largely left off the resulting patents.
Yeah, it's a real shame.
She was repeatedly overlooked for major scientific prizes until very, very recently. I mean, it's a sobering reminder of how foundational work in biomedical history can sometimes just be overshadowed or miscredited.
Absolutely. A vital piece of scientific history to correct, without a doubt. But, once the scientific community had this native GLP-1 hormone in hand, they understood what it did. but then they immediately hit a massive pharmacological roadblock.
Yeah, and I want to use an analogy here to explain this roadblock for you because it's fascinating. Native GLP-1 is essentially a self-destructing spy message.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Your body reads it, and then it literally goes up in smoke.
Yeah.
We have an enzyme circulating in us called DPP4, and its primary job is to shred natural GLP-1 within like 1 to 2 minutes of it entering the bloodstream.
Yep. Just completely destroys it. And that rapid degradation makes the native hormone totally useless as a medication.
Right, because you can't give a patient a drug that completely vanishes from their system before they even walk out of the clinic doors.
Exactly. To treat a chronic metabolic condition, you need a molecule that can survive in the bloodstream for a sustained period of time.
Which brings us back to our venomous lizard.
There we go.
If the human body is designed to destroy this hormone in under 2 minutes, how on earth did we eventually get to a drug that a patient only has to inject once a week?
So the answer arrived via a researcher named John Eng in the early 1990s. He was examining the saliva of the Gila monster,
As one does.
right, as one naturally does.
Yeah.
But he was specifically searching for biologically active peptides. And he discovered a compound he called exendin-4.
Okay.
Now, structurally, exendin-4 is remarkably similar to human GLP-1. It fits perfectly into the human GLP-1 receptor, successfully activated.
Oh, wow.
But the crucial difference is that its physical shape is just slightly altered enough that the human DPP-4 enzyme, that shredder enzyme, doesn't recognize it.
That is incredible.
The enzyme cannot latch on to break it down, so instead of lasting 1 to 2 minutes, exendin-4 circulates and functions for hours.
It is just wild to think the answer to a decades-long pharmacological puzzle was just sitting out in the desert in a lizard's mouth.
Truly.
And that specific discovery led directly to the very first drug in this class, right? A synthetic version of the lizard peptide called exenatide, sold under the brand name Bietta, which the FDA approved back in 2005.
That's right. And since that initial breakthrough, drug developers have basically relied on 2 major engineering tricks to extend the drug's lifespan even further.
Okay, what are they?
Well, they either mimic that lizard peptide's resistant structure, or they utilize a newer approach, which is taking the GLP-1 molecule and attaching a fatty acid tail to it.
A fatty acid tail.
Oh.
So by attaching that tail, I would imagine you're making the molecule heavier or like stickier, fundamentally changing how it moves through the bloodstream.
Yeah, that's a great way to visualize it. That tail allows the synthetic GLP-1 molecule to physically bind to albumin. Yeah, it's an extremely common, bulky protein constantly floating around in your blood. By clinging to the albumin, the drug is physically shielded from the enzymes trying to break it down.
Oh, so it just rides around on the albumin.
Exactly. The albumin effectively carries it around, gradually releasing the active drug over time. And that slow release mechanism is how we stretched the drug's lifespan from a matter of minutes to a full week, which is what allows for those once-weekly injections you hear about.
That is such elegant engineering. But I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because a lot of people hear the phrase injectable diabetes drug that manages blood sugar, and they assume we're just talking about a synthetic, modernized version of insulin.
Oh, right.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a huge misconception.
Yeah.
And that distinction is exactly why these GLP-1 agonists are considered so revolutionary.
How so?
Because insulin is a brute force hormone. When a patient injects insulin, it commands the cells to take up glucose from the blood completely regardless of the surrounding context.
Right.
If you inject too much insulin, your blood sugar can plummet to dangerously low levels. That state is called hypoglycemia, and it can actually be fatal.
Yeah, it acts like a gas pedal that is permanently stuck to the floor. It just forces the sugar down.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But GLP-1 agonists, however, operate on a totally different principle called glucose dependence.
Glucose dependence.
Yeah. When the drug activates the GLP-1 receptor on the pancreas, it only amplifies the release of insulin if your blood sugar is already elevated.
Oh, I see.
So if your glucose levels are normal or they're trending low, the drug essentially does nothing to the insulin release pathway. It possesses this built-in biological safety mechanism.
Which completely explains why non-diabetic people taking it for weight loss aren't constantly passing out from low blood sugar.
Exactly. Furthermore, amplifying insulin is only one part of the cascade. Activating the GLP-1 receptor triggers several simultaneous effects.
What else does it do?
Well, it signals the alpha cells in the pancreas to suppress the release of glucagon. Now, glucagon is the hormone that normally instructs your liver to pump out more of its stored sugar.
So the drug actively stops the liver from adding unnecessary fuel to the fire.
Yes. It also targets the stomach, significantly slowing down gastric emptying. So food literally physically leaves your stomach at a slower rate, which severely blunts those sharp, dangerous spikes in blood sugar immediately after a meal.
Right. And then there's the final piece of the puzzle, which is arguably the thing driving the current cultural obsession, what this molecule does when it reaches the brain.
Oh, absolutely. The drug actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and acts directly on GLP-1 receptors located in the hypothalamus and the brainstem.
And those are the ancient deep-seated regions of the brain, right?
Yeah, the regions responsible for regulating hunger, satiety, and reward. It basically provides the brain with a continuous, powerful neurochemical signal that the body is completely full.
It's amazing. And when you track the clinical trial data over the last 2 decades, you literally watch the medical definition of this drug class completely shapeshift as we learn more about those biological mechanisms.
Totally.
Like back in 2005 with Byetta, the medical community viewed this purely as a glucose-lowering medication for diabetes. Patients saw their blood sugar metrics drop, and they just happened to lose a little bit of weight in the process.
Right. At the time, that slight weight loss was treated merely as a pleasant side effect. Because historically, many diabetes medications, especially insulin therapies, notoriously caused weight gain.
Oh, true.
So a drug that effectively lowered glucose while helping a patient drop perhaps 5 pounds was a nice bonus. But it wasn't the main event by any stretch.
But that perception violently shifts around 2021, right? With a clinical trial called STEP 1.
Yeah, step 1 was a game changer.
Researchers took semaglutide, administered it at a higher dose to people without diabetes, and the results were just paradigm-altering.
Unbelievable numbers.
Over 68 weeks, participants lost an average of nearly 15% of their total body weight. To put that in perspective for you, the placebo group, who only received standard lifestyle and diet counseling, lost about 2 to 3%.
We had never seen a magnitude of medical weight loss like that 15% figure from a non-surgical treatment.
Yeah.
Ever.
Wow.
It proved definitively that human appetite isn't solely a behavioral choice or a matter of willpower. It's a tangible biological pathway that you can safely and effectively control with pharmacology.
And that data compelled the FDA to approve the higher dose of semaglutide specifically for the treatment of obesity under the brand name Wegovy.
Right, which is when the cultural explosion really started.
But the clinical trials kept going, revealing yet another layer to the drug. The sources highlight 2 massive trials, the LEADER trial in 2016 for diabetes patients, and then the SELECT trial in 2023.
Yeah, SELECT is huge.
It is particularly fascinating because it tested semaglutide in overweight people who did not have diabetes but who had existing heart disease.
Yeah, the SELECT trial involved over 17,000 adults, the massive study. And it demonstrated a roughly 20% reduction in major cardiovascular events. So things like heart attacks and strokes compared to a placebo.
20%.
Yes. And why this matters enormously to the medical community is that it decoupled the heart benefit from the glucose control.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning it proved that the cardiovascular protection wasn't just a secondary benefit of having lower blood sugar. Activating the GLP-1 receptor is doing something directly protective for the heart and blood vessels.
Like physically changing them.
It's likely a complex combination of things, reducing systemic inflammation, lowering blood pressure, and reducing visceral fat. But it's direct.
It's just wild to see the evolution. Like, if you asked a 1990s endocrinologist what a GLP-1 agonist is, they'd say a glucose drug. But a 2024 cardiologist might call it a heart protection drug that happens to make you lose weight.
It's a total redefinition.
But, you know, hacking a biological system, this effectively rarely happens in a vacuum. If we're pharmacologically forcing the brain to ignore hunger signals, how is the rest of the body reacting to that sudden, massive deficit in calories?
Right.
I mean, the clinical trial data sounds almost miraculous, which inherently makes you wonder, what is the catch?
And the trade-offs are significant, and they're critical for any potential patient to understand. The first major reality check comes from a trial known as Step 4, which examined what we call the discontinuation dilemma.
So what happens when you stop taking it?
Exactly. Researchers monitored what happens when patients stop taking the drug after successfully losing the weight. And the data showed that participants regained a substantial portion of the lost weight within roughly a year of stopping the injections.
Which directly challenges a huge misconception in the public sphere right now. Many people assume they can take these drugs for, 6 months, hit a target weight for a wedding or a vacation, and then just stop, treating it like a temporary course of antibiotics.
Yeah, and medically speaking, that is entirely the wrong framework. The field now views obesity treatment with GLP-1 agonists as a chronic, lifelong therapy.
Lifelong.
Lifelong. You take the medication indefinitely to manage a chronic biological condition in the exact same way a patient takes a daily statin for cholesterol or, medication to keep their blood pressure down. If you remove the medication, the underlying biological mechanisms driving the obesity return.
Another prevalent misconception surrounds the side effects, particularly nausea. You often hear commentators claim that patients only lose weight on these drugs because they are just too nauseous to eat.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. And while nausea is a very real documented side effect, especially during the early weeks of treatment or when stepping up the dosage, it is not the primary mechanism driving the weight loss. The weight loss is functionally driven by that direct signaling to the hunger centers in the brain and the dramatically slowed stomach emptying. We know this is true because in the vast majority of patients, the initial nausea eventually subsides as their body acclimates to the drug. Yet the sustained weight loss and profound appetite suppression continue unabated.
We also need to address the concerns regarding body composition. Rapid weight loss often brings the risk of losing meaningful muscle mass.
It does. Because the calorie deficit is so severe and the weight loss is so rapid, there's a legitimate clinical concern that patients are losing a significant fraction of lean muscle tissue alongside the fat.
And you don't want that.
No, absolutely not. This is why current clinical guidance heavily emphasizes that patients must pair these medications with adequate dietary protein intake and structured strength training.
Right.
The goal of medicine is to make the patient metabolically healthier, not just smaller and physically weaker.
Right, that makes total sense. And there are also strict safety warnings outlined in the sources. You see a boxed warning regarding a specific rare type of thyroid cancer called medullary thyroid carcinoma, which is linked to a genetic syndrome known as MEN2.
Right, MEN2, or multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2. It's a rare genetic mutation that predisposes individuals to certain tumors. Regulators placed that boxed warning on the drugs based on thyroid tumors that were observed during rodent studies.
Rodent studies, okay.
Yeah, so it remains an active area of scientific debate whether that specific mechanism of tumor growth translates directly to human biology, but regulatory agencies appropriately err on the side of caution. They advise patients with a personal or family history of MEN2 to completely avoid the drugs.
Naturally.
And there are also rarer documented risks like pancreatitis and severe gallbladder disease. And of course, the dangers of unregulated compounding pharmacies that popped up during the 2022 and 2023 shortages.
Oh, right. People buying sketchy versions online because they couldn't get the real thing.
Exactly. Extremely dangerous.
Stepping back from the clinical risks for a moment, I want to talk about a phenomenon that comes up constantly in both the clinical research and in patient testimonies. And it's the concept of food noise.
Yes, food noise.
Patients report experiencing this profound, sudden quiet in their minds. The constant, exhausting background hum of thinking about their next meal or negotiating with the craving just turns off.
It just goes away.
To me, this completely dismantles society's long-held moralistic view of diet and body weight. For decades, overweight individuals were told their condition was simply a failure of willpower or character.
Exactly.
But if a simple weekly injection derived from a lizard peptide can instantly silence those cravings, it proves that appetite is really just a biological dial.
It is the profound paradigm shift. It moves obesity away from being judged as a behavioral failing and firmly establishes it as a valid pharmacological target. And understanding that biological dial perfectly sets up where this entire field of medicine is heading next. Because if turning down one biological pathway yields these kinds of results, pharmacologists are already proving that targeting two pathways simultaneously works even better.
Which brings us to the future of the field. The science is already moving past pure GLP-1 drugs.
It is. The newest major breakthrough is a drug called tirzepatide, currently sold under the brand name Mounjaro for diabetes and Zepbound for obesity. Tirzepatide is what we classify as a dual agonist.
Dual agonist, meaning it hits two targets.
Right. It targets the GLP-1 receptor, just like semaglutide does, but it simultaneously targets a second incretin hormone receptor called GIP, which stands for glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide.
So if a single GLP-1 therapy is like putting a heavy padlock on your refrigerator door to stop you from eating, a dual agonist like tirzepatide feels like putting a padlock on the fridge and simultaneously turning off all the fast food commercials on your television. You are attacking the problem from multiple interconnected biological angles.
That's a perfect way to describe it. The synergy between those two pathways is remarkable. GIP is another incretin hormone, but its receptors are distributed differently in the body, notably within adipose or fat tissue.
Oh, interesting.
So by activating both GLP-1 and GIP receptors, tirzepatide not only enhances the insulin response even further, but it also appears to improve how the body's fat cells store excess energy, pulling it out of circulation more efficiently.
Wow.
Additionally, the GIP activation seems to somehow mitigate some of the nausea associated with GLP-1, allowing clinicians to safely administer higher, more effective doses.
And the clinical trials for this dual approach, which are the SURMOUNT trials, showed even larger weight loss numbers than semaglutide alone.
Significantly larger.
It really sparks a fascinating debate in the scientific community. Like, I think about it this way. If native GLP-1 was a landline phone, semaglutide is the first iPhone, and tirzepatide suggests we might already be moving on to the iPhone 4.
Yeah, that's exactly where we are.
Are single hormone therapies, the original Ozempics and Wegovy's of the world, are they already peaking as a mature technology? It seems the immediate future heavily favors these multi-hormone combination drugs. I know researchers are already conducting advanced trials on triple agonists.
They are. The pace of innovation in this specific pharmacological space is just staggering. And it underscores why this scientific history matters to you right now.
Yeah.
Because for the first time in modern medical history, we have a single, highly effective class of drugs that meaningfully treats obesity and type 2 diabetes simultaneously while actively protecting the cardiovascular system from major catastrophic events.
And the economic and societal scale of this breakthrough is almost hard to wrap your head around. Our sources point out that Novo Nordisk, the Danish pharmaceutical company that manufactures semaglutide, saw its market valuation grow so massively in 2023 that it briefly exceeded the entire gross domestic product of its home country, Denmark.
That is just wild.
That is the sheer economic weight of a single drug class.
But that unprecedented scale looks massive, complex societal challenges. Health insurance systems and governments are currently wrestling with how to finance a very expensive lifelong medication for a massive percentage of the population.
Right.
We have already witnessed acute, dangerous supply shortages where diabetic patients couldn't get the necessary drug to control their blood sugar because of the overwhelming off-label demand for weight loss. We are facing massive questions about healthcare equity and access that we haven't even begun to solve.
So we started this deep dive looking at how a strange observation about the human gut and a protein hidden in Gila monster venom led to a multi-billion-dollar shift in human health. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We know from the sources that these drugs cross the blood-brain barrier and act directly on the brain's deep reward pathways. They dial down the mental preoccupation, the neurological reward of eating. So if these drugs can physically quiet the neurological reward of food, what else could they quiet?
Oh, that's a fascinating question.
Right. Could a medication derived from a desert lizard one day be used to turn down the noise of other compulsive behaviors? Could this incredibly versatile biological mechanism hold the key to treating alcohol use disorder, smoking addiction, or even compulsive gambling? It makes you realize that by hacking the incretin effect, we didn't just find a new way to treat diabetes, we might have stumbled upon a master key to human desire.
And the blueprint for that master key was waiting for us all along, quietly hidden in the venom of a Gila monster.
Next time you see a lizard in the desert, maybe say thank you.